Hello, welcome back. You're halfway through the Compass Box special we're doing over here on the Single Malt Review. And so without further ado, we will carry on going down the hole, and this time it's the Peat Monster, I believe, which Dave has the stats on.
Well, we're nearing our end of our travail through the Compass Box selection. It is, in fact, yes, the Peat Monster. To date, most of these Compass Box blends have had quite poetic names. Asula, the Spice Tree, Oak Cross. Now, it's pretty upfront, it's descriptive, it is the Peat Monster. And according to the literature, what we have, 53% Islay single malt, 27% peated Highland single malt. Oh, pardon me, I'm seeing some interestingness here. Alright, in 1 point, yeah, as I say, I'll continue on. Okay. 53% Islay single malt, 27% Highland single malt, 20% Island single malt. But here in the Appleton notes, we've got Islay, we got Mull, but then they tell us medium peated Speyside. Is it Speyside? Is it Highland? Two different descriptors, two different parts of the notes. But as I say, these are only representative descriptions.
That's interesting. That could mean a few things. Mull, thankfully, only means one. That's the Tobermory distillery, and if it says monstrously peated, as it suggests, then I think it's probably their Lashig whisky. Their heavily peated make that they make out of there.
That whether it is in fact Speyside or Highland for that third whisky, it's going to be fairly peated anyway, and some distilleries are so close to the boundary it could be either, we don't know which.
Yeah, medium peated. They could be referring to Ardmore, which is sort of in that area, and that is I would have called it a fully peated mainland, but I guess you could consider it semi-peated, especially compared to some of the Islay ones, I suppose, but we'll just have to dig in and find out.
As for our cask composition, 99% refill bourbon, and 1% of what is now becoming Compass Box's signature move, the new French oak. So that's going to be a very small influence of new wood, mostly refill bourbon. So what we'll be tasting primarily is that peaty whisky.
Well, so it is, as you might expect, pretty peaty. Not by any means the peatiest thing I've ever nosed, not by a long shot. It's fairly indicative of, well, Islay's the dominant nose on it, but I guess there is maybe a little bit of sort of drier, less tangy peat coming from the mainland. I don't know.
Now, the majority of this is Islay peated whisky, so that's going to be the strongest influence.
I'd go one step further and say the majority of this is Colilla peated whisky. There's a certain note there which I have really come to classify as Colilla, and it's the sort of lemon citrus quality to the nose, lemon zest almost. And it doesn't have any of that iodine tang, which is the sort of the playbook of Lefroy. Lefroy is always pretty easy to detect.
I'm getting a slightly briny maritime note. It's not Lefroy-y, but it's definitely evocative of some of the other island distilleries.
Now that I really think about it, pretty sure I can pick out the Tobermory as well. They have a certain sort of mid-range pungency, which the Islay whiskies don't have. The Islay whiskies are all quite sharp in terms of their nose, especially. Tobermory is quite pungent, quite fusty, if you're the Scottish nomenclature. But what does it actually say here?
Yeah, well, like the Spice Tree we tried previously, it's bottled at 46%. However, unlike the other Compass Box whiskies we've tried to date, this one doesn't give you precise detail on which town or village houses the distillery it came from. Obviously, in the case of, say, Islay or Mull, that's more or less beside the point. But for the remaining Speyside or Highland whisky, it's left broad and left open. We know it's peated, but aside from that, not much more detail.
Well, we'll just have to see what we can find out. So that's the nose.
It's not being spoon-fed details this time, so we have to do a bit more thinking for ourselves. So that's
to summarise that one. There's a lot of Colilla-y, lemon zesty, fresh fruitiness on the nose, and then that's coupled with a slight dryness, which will be coming from the peated mainland, and a significant rounded, fusty, savoury umami quality, which
there's a little bit of sort of a cigar ash quality, which I get from some especially peaty Bowmores or slightly from Kilhoman.
And what's the strength here?
46.
It's 46 again.
Yeah, that shares top place for the strength as far as these particular whiskies go. Oh, that peat is a slow burn. It seems at first you just get a hint of fresh lemonade and lemon sorbet from those refill bourbon casks. Then it hits you. It's sort of an ashtray to the face. It's
really
very
is.
smoky, very sooty.
Ash is the word I would use. It's a very dry, ashy peat. It is a very long way away from that very iodine-y Lefroy style of things. I just in my own mind, I kind of have Islay whiskies on a spectrum, and Lefroy is at one end with absolutely really, really tangy, really, really seaweedy iodine whiskey, and then way over on the other end is Bunnahabhain, with its practically no peat in most of its releases. And everything else there lies on kind of a spectrum there in terms of not just strength of peat, because there are whiskies that are peatier than Lefroy, like Ardbeg, but they are a different sort of peat. It's a bit of a peat rainbow going on here, but that seaweedy iodininess really, really manifests the most when you're dealing with Lefroy, and I'm not tasting any of that here. It's very, very dry, and part of that will be coming through from the, if it is Ardmore, which is a very, very dry peatiness, different peat source than Islay entirely, and the rest, I'm still sure, I mean, it could always be wrong, there's always the danger there with the multitudinous nature of Scotch malt whisky, but I do think it's Caol Ila coming through, just because of that lemon, the zesty quality.
Caol Ila I associate more with the kind of a very salty, slightly oily fishiness. There's just a hint of sort of like the tin sardines or canned salmon.
Fishiness, it's more, they are certainly an oily whisky sometimes, but most people would say rather than fishiness, which is more of an Ardbeg quality, it's more of a smoky bacon coming through from Caol Ila. So it's certainly it's a preserved salted smoked meat. It's just most people would say that that's more of the bacon end of the spectrum, but it can depend wildly on the how it's been handled. This one there is, to me, a conspicuous amount of fruit going on, especially on the back of the palate. And I'm not absolutely sure where that's coming from.
That could well be the Highland stroke Speyside influence. A generous amount of water to this, so I can try to extract some more nuance. This is, as far as peat goes, this is an interesting sort of confluence. It's got all the strength and intensity of a heavily peated Islay whisky, but that peatiness is tempered somewhat by the addition of other peated whiskies. So all the peat, but not all the Islay peat. You can taste a little bit of the peat from other regions whisky at least.
It's a very difficult whisky to pin down, which makes it a slightly different one to quantify. I enjoy it quite a lot, but I think it's suffering somewhat given the proximity to the elements of Islay peat, which we tasted recently, which was an absolutely stunning ensemble of, in that case, 100% Islay peated whisky. But this one seems a little all over the place in comparison. There is certainly a lot to taste. It would certainly be a good whisky to sit down with and really, really analyse. But in terms of its quality as a sort of a moorish whisky, one to just enjoy and then maybe enjoy another glass, or not that we have that opportunity with these little vials here, but if one was making their way through a bottle, this is, I think it demands quite a lot of thought to enjoy.
I've added quite a lot of water, and that has improved things somewhat. That's made it much more clearer, more streamlined, and I'm tasting, there's a good hint of sea salt now, a little seaweed, and a character I can only really describe as being like the rind from a camembert or brie. That kind of extremely bitter, waxy rind. If you've ever just cut some off and just taste it just to see what will happen, it's never good, but there's a lot of that flavour coming through here. It's quite strong.
A distinct one. I'm not sure I'm getting that 100%, but it's certainly, I think I get what you mean on
it's
a
bit
sort
bitter,
of a textural level.
Yeah.
No, it's a slightly tricky one. I think it's not my favourite peated blend, I think that one will for quite some time be the Elements of Islay, which we recently tasted, just because that one was so sort of consummate in what it did. But it is certainly it's a very interesting peated blend. And that word, calling something interesting is, as you'll rightly call us on, it's a bit of a cop-out description for things. But in this case, it really is quite interesting. It's not particularly moorish or sort of delicious. It's certainly not unpleasant by any means. It's a very, very nice whiskey. But it's quite... You have to think quite hard in order to really drill down and get the most out of what it's putting out, because it's putting out quite a lot of things at once. It's very, very complex.
It's a good way to enjoy a very heavily peated whiskey that's not just all Islay peat all the time. It's got a healthy component of Islay peat, obviously, but it's not just all that. It's actually more besides. And I think it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Enjoying a heavily peated whiskey with the Islay characters subdued somewhat.
Certainly fascinating, and if you're one to sit down with and sort of try and dissect and figure out exactly where these component parts are coming from, it's probably the best exercise you can do with this one. As for scores, this isn't really my favourite, but I can respect what it's doing. It's an 82 from me. What do you think?
Well, it's a step back from the previous foray through the compass box, the spice tree. But I will give it 83. It's a good example of peat. It's a good novel experiment with peat, and as with the others, it's a combination of probably some fairly excellent single malts into a new and interesting concoction.
I'd say this, it's a peated whiskey that you're not going to find anywhere else. It certainly doesn't taste like anything else peated on the market, so worth a look. Certainly worth a taste. But anyway, for the next video we'll be moving on to the last one, which is a bit of an oddball. It's a 100% grain, so that's somewhere we have never been before. Or actually we might have. Don't quote me on that. I think we might have done a single grain sometime. Anyway, we'll be right back with that one. Hang about.
Sludger.